Okay. Tonight we are learning the Ilu Nishmat. Sarah Bat Avram, that was Elena Wiesel's mother, who she had has Yortzeh for her today, and also Maya Gortz's father, Avram Ben Dvorah, whose Yortzeh is also today. Learn the Ilu Nishmat to him. The topic tonight, we're going to finish off one more idea with Yehi Kh'vod. Got a bit of an introduction to Ashrei and maybe try to correct some misconceptions about it and also give us some insights into the power of Ashrei. So what I'm going to do is put on the screen a few things. First is the Tefilla of Yehi Kh'vod. Remember, we talked about it was an amalgam of different psukim, Tanakh, and we talked about certain ones already. We talked about the idea of the order, Hashem Melech Malach Boch. We talked about what does it mean? Rabot Machashavot Blevish. Man has many thoughts, plans, and Tzat Hashem Hitakum, and it'll be what Hashem's plan. That's what will last forever. And we spoke a little bit about the last psukim, or last couple psukim, V'hu Rachum Yichaper Avo. It said that it's mentioned in Hodu, but it's mentioned here. It's kind of bolet. What I mean, it's pronounced because according to some, this is not even included actually in the Yehi Kh'vod, but it was a later add-on. We started talking a little bit about what does it mean and where else it appears. So what we dealt with already is that it, of course, it appears here in Yehi Kh'vod. We talked about a little story about why it was added on Mondays and Thursdays, Nusach Ashkenaz at least, at the beginning, because by Sfaradim it's later in the Tachanun, that's added on Mondays and Thursdays in Tachanun, where I want to talk about just for a few minutes about the fact that it's mentioned in Arvit and that we say it at the Levaya, and then one comment from Rav Aaron Lichtenstein Zatzal about this appearance in Yehi Kh'vod. So let's take a look at this thing. Make this bigger. Okay, in the beginning of Mariv, on the weekdays, we say the pasuk V'hu Rachum before Baruch. It's mentioned in the Rambam as part of Hilchot Tefillah. Tanya, the Admor HaZaken says like this: Mevitam amirato b'shem Reb Elazar Gadol shehu harokeach. The Tanya brings a reason why is it necessary to mention V'hu Rachum. Remember, V'hu Rachum means that Hashem was merciful. He delays giving out punishment, and when it is, it's going to be hopefully small. Why do we say it at Marav? The shame of the Rokeach. Whether you say it or not, we talked about the fact that at Shacharit and Mincha, before Tefillah, there's a korban called the Korban Tamid, which was originally brought to the Beit HaMikdash, and now we read about it. Their purposes was to bring a fancy word in English, expiation or forgiveness, kapara, on behalf of Am Yisrael. Nowadays we read them, and that's supposed to help and act as a form of kapara. But since by Mariv, Arvit she'en korban lechaper, but by Mariv there is no korban, we know that there are no korbanot brought at night. Then, according to Tanya, tiknu lomar v'hu rachum yichaper avo. So this would act as some form of a mitigating statement that before we go into Mariv, before we sit before Hashem, before Mariv, in the judgment of Avit, that we want to, so to speak, invoke this idea: Hashem is merciful, and even if we deserve some kind of an onesh, it would be mitigated or even deferred. And Rashi says, why is it that we say V'hu Rachum at night before Mariv? This is an unusual reason that's given, something that we will have very little connection to nowadays in the normative shul. That they used to do is they would give makot to somebody, they would give lashes to somebody between Mincha and Arvit. Immediately, whenever there was someone who was chayav makot for some reason, time Beit HaMikdash and the Sanhedrin, right after that they would do it, and then they would ask for rachamim for this person. And furthermore, shekol adam chotei. We do things wrong during the day. In the evening we have to say v'hu rachum. Why? Ki b'hu rachum yesh lamed tevot There are 39 letters. Mispar malkot 40 chaser achat vayu sofrim bo. And in makot, when they gave lashes, the maximum someone could get would be 39. So as a representative, this is some little word that someone thought. This is Rashi. This is in Rashi Siddur, so it's not should not be dismissed so quickly. Now I'm going to read to you the words of the Midrash in Midrash on Ruth, and it's going to apply also to a levaya, to a funeral. This is a little bit more intense of a reason. Shlosha malachei chabala moshlim begehinom. There are 3 angels of, let's just say punishment. It's not really punishment. The inflict punishment on humans in Gehenna. Vehem mashchit, af v'chema. Those are the 3 names: the destroyer, anger, and another form of anger, stronger form of anger. V'mashchitim ha'ele, and these destroyers, sholtim kol yemei hashavua mizman tfilat arvit. They have the power, somehow invested in them by Hashem, to do what they need to do, starting with the time of Arvit. Therefore, we say v'hurachum v'chaper avon v'lo yashchit. The words v'lo yashchit keneged malach mashchit are connected, or opposite, or in deference to the malach named mashchit, or that is the destroyer. So we're saying that Hashem should have mercy and not allow the destroyer to do what he needs to do. V'yirbal hashiv apo, and he is very great in returning his anger. We say that keneged the malach named af, which means anger. V'lo ya'ir kol chamato, and he will not awaken all of his anger against us. Keneged malach chema. Okay, so this is a little bit of a different approach. We're going to see a completely different approach in a moment from Rav Aaron Lichtenstein Zatzal. But this idea of it's kind of like Hashem says, okay, I have created these malachim to do certain things. I give them a window in which time to do those things. And I'm also going to give you the opportunity so that you can turn to me and say, don't allow them to do what they need to do, or at least mitigate what they're going to do. And therefore, the same thing applies when at a levaya. I'm sure if some of you paid attention, and you've noticed at a funeral that usually the first 2 or 3 shovelfuls that a person puts in of earth into the kever, usually the custom is, again, it's all custom, there's no halacha involved, is they turn the shovel upside down and they use it to put earth into the kever, and we'll say the pasuk because at the moment a person dies is the beginning of their time period of going through the judgment in Olam Haba. It's a whole process that they go through, and we're asking Hashem on behalf of the niftar, on behalf of the person who's passed away, that Hashem should mitigate his judgment and his anger against this person's neshama. In a very different approach right now. I told you before that there's some opinions that Yehi Kh'vod ends technically right before the pasuk v'hurachum, and that was added on later. So this Rav Moshe Lichtenstein, who's Rav Aaron Zatzal, his son, Rav in Beit Shemesh, wrote the following. I was going to read and translate. Shamati me'avi mori, I heard from my father, shelamaaseh v'hurachum eineno shayach Yehi Kh'vod. As I said to you before, that the pasuk of Hurachum is not really connected to Hurachum is not connected to Yehi Kh'vod. What is its function there? It's an introduction, an opening statement to the rest of David. What does that mean? Just like the words V'hurachum yichaper avon is the opening statement of the beginning of Arvit. So too, this is the opening statement of Shacharit. In this connection, he says, according to this, the main section of Psukei de Zimra begins with Ashrei. And this is this introductory statement, Burachum, is kind of like, we said before, we talked about that there's brachot, brachot hashachar, psukei de zimra, shacharit. Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal had an opinion that there was Berchot HaShachar, then there was some other section which might be like the pre-Psukei de Zimra, even though it doesn't use that word. And then with the words V'hu Rachum, it's really connecting to or introducing the main section of Psukei de Zimra. Lachen hu hitzia lomar pasuk zeh gam im me'achrin lebeit hakneset midalgim ashar shehi Kh'vod. We will learn eventually of what happens when a person comes by accident late to davening, what they should skip. He says that even though you may, the part of the routine would be you would skip Yehi Kh'vod unless enough time presents itself. He says that you still should say the pasuk of Psukim V'hu Rachum because it's the connection and the introduction to the main section of Psukei de Zimra. What comes out of this opinion, approach, that it turns out that the end of this mizmor is not really the end of the mizmor. But really, and this is why I wanted to bring this up, he says that it functions as the introduction. Now, if I say to here's Yehi Kh'vod, where's the last pasuk? You'd say those two psukim. But he's saying no, it actually ends just before that. And this actually acts as the entryway, the patiach to Ashrei. Also, this falls in line with what the Ramah tells us. He tells us that if you come late, like I said before, if you come late to davening, that you still may skip. You might skip Yehi Kh'vod, but you should still say the pasuk of Psukim V'hu Rachum Yechaper Avon. So, before we get into Ashrei, I'm going to tell you a teacher halacha that you may or may not be aware of, and it ties into this pasuk. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about in Ashrei. We will definitely not get through it all tonight. Azat Hashem will continue with it next week. There's a halacha that says that you're not allowed to make a shul or beit midrash a kapandaria. Kapandaria is an Aramaic word meaning it's actually probably from some other language used in Aramaic, means a shortcut. So let's say, for example, you have a shul that has two doorways. So use Pnei Shmuel here in the neighborhood as an example. You can enter in the back of the men's section, and you can, or in the women's section. You can go out on the front side of the men's section or in the women's section. So you have an entry and an exit from both ends. Let's say I need to go from one end of the shul to the other end of the shul, not to sit to daven or anything. I just want to go cut through the shul. It's a shortcut. You can't do that. In addition to that, even within the shul itself, when you have a bima in the middle, you can't cross over the bima to get from one side of the shul to the other. Let's say you want to go say something to a friend, want to tell somebody something, give something to somebody. You can't cross over the bima itself because that's also making a kapandaria or a shortcut. So what happens, tachlis, you want to go into the shul, and you can't just stop to go into the shul. You can't go in there and just walk out. That's another problem. You notice, number one, you don't cut through as a shortcut. Number two, you don't just walk into a shul. Let's say you're looking for somebody. You don't just walk into the shul for no reason, without the reason of actually davening. So, every time I've gone into the shul, I'm sure many of you too, you walk into the shul, it's not because you're coming to daven. Maybe you're going to put something in your cubby. Maybe you're going to be going to get something. Maybe you're going to tell somebody something. So what are you supposed to do? You stop, you sit down on a chair, and you say, Ashrei Yoshev Vetecha Odi Halalu Chasel. Brought in halacha that's the idea. You say that pasuk, and we're going to see why, because it means basically happy is the one who sits in the house of Hashem. So you sit down and say Ashrei Yoshev Vetecha. It's true also if you cut through a beit midrash. Very commonly, you'll see in many shuls, including Pnei Shmuel, you'll have an entrance from the main shul to the beit midrash, and from the beit midrash into the hallway. So he will cut through from the shul through the beit midrash and then go into the hallway without sitting down or learning a pasuk, doing something. Then you've made it a kapandar, you've made it a shortcut. So that's to prevent that. One of the solutions is to sit for a second, say Ashrei Yoshev Vetecha Yilu Chasela b'Shem Hashem. There's no Shem Hashem. No. And then you move on, do what you have to do. Okay, so I want to make sure I didn't forget to mention. Let's talk about a few things before we start looking at a few slides. Let's take a look first just at the Tefillah itself. You're familiar with it. We know that's in the alphabetical order, which is going to come up. We're going to talk about a few things about that. We're going to talk about some misconceptions about Ashrei. But I don't right now. I'm not going to read through the paragraph because I want to just talk about it for a couple of minutes. And then we're going to take a look at some points. We have talked many times in this class and in other classes about the idea that we relate to Hashem at minimum on two levels. One is ahava and one is yirah. One is the love of Hashem and one is the fear/awe of Hashem. And one of the ways that manifests itself in davening is we have a relationship with Hashem that is third person and a relationship that is second person. We have ata, second person, and we have a lot of who, he is, like Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. But we say Baruch ata. We talked about this already a number of times. When we talk in the familiar, ata, that's the idea of the ahava. That's the Hashem is our Abba, Hashem is our Father. When we talk in the third person, we talk in the perspective of the yirah, more of the fear and awe of Hashem, and in the idea of Hashem's the melech. It's like the avinu malkenu perspective, our Father, our King. In Ashrei, there are 22 psukim. 11 are said in second person, and 11 are said in third person. And the purpose, again, being that this expresses this idea of our dual relationship with Hashem. We cannot relate to Hashem only through Yirah. We cannot relate to Hashem only with Ahava. There has to be, there are two tracks here. Parenthetically, for those of you who were in Shul in Pnei Shmuel Friday night, I spoke for a couple of minutes and mentioned something I've mentioned many, many times in this and other classes, is that I believe very much in the idea that Yirat Hashem, the Yirah, Yud Resh Aleph Hey, is closely associated not with the Shoresh, but the idea of Ri'iyah, seeing. When seeing Hashem in everything leads to Yirah. And I said I've said it for years and I didn't have a source. From then, two people approached me and showed me a source that's similar idea. One is from Reb Shamshon Hirsch and one is from Kli Yakar. So Baruch Shekivanti. We refer colloquially, let me just go back to the slide for a second so you'll know what I'm talking about. We refer colloquially to this paragraph as Ashrei. By the way, it's Ashrei, not Ashrei, even though we say Ashrei. Again, we'll come to pronunciation at a later date. But the truth of the matter is that these psukim here, from the words Ashrei Yoshevei V'techa Od Yalu Chasela, Ashrei Am Shekacha Lo, Ashrei Am She'Hashem Elokav, those words really are appended because it's referred to in the Gemara, and we're going to take a look at that soon, as the paragraph known as Tehillah LeDavid. Because if you look this up, you will not see those words before the words Tehillah LeDavid. Okay, so we're going to see why they were added and why is it connected to this. But when we do say Ashrei, we have to understand something. One of the things David HaMelech said, and we're going to, and Ashkenazim will start saying Rosh Chodesh Elul. I say Ashkenazim because Sfaradim say it every day. They're saying the tefillah of the David Hashem Ori V'Yishi. And in there, we know that there are the words, Shifti B'Vet Hashem Kol Yemei Chayai. I want to sit in the house of God all the days of my life. Lachazot B'Noam Hashem U'Levaker B'Heichalo. So the idea of sitting in the house of Hashem can be meant in the literal sense and the figurative sense. The literal sense can mean a Beit Knesset, Shul. It cannot mean the Beit HaMikdash, except for David or future Davidic kings, because only a Davidic king is allowed to sit in the Beit HaMikdash. So Bezat Hashem, when Mashiach comes, he'll sit in the Beit HaMikdash. But we're talking now in the metaphorical sense and the literal sense. The literal sense is happy is the one, or fortunate is one who lives in the house of Hashem, meaning that they are at home in the house of Hashem, i.e. the Beit Midrash, the Shul. The other is that we know that the whole world is considered also house of Hashem because this Meloch Haaretz Kh'vodo. His Kh'vod, we've talked about this, the Kh'vod Hashem, the glory of Hashem is everywhere, and that we are, when we, so to speak, quote, bask in the glory of Hashem, that we are fortunate to be in the house of Hashem. Yeah, I'll leave it like that. Another point I want to make. Let me see. Let's take a look. Okay, let me take a look at a slide. These are all still right now more of the introduction, take a look at this slide here. Brachot, which I'm sure many of you have heard before. We're going to talk about this for a few minutes. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Avina. Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Avina, Kol haomer tehillah leDavid. Remember, it doesn't say Ashrei. Whoever says the paragraph, tehillah leDavid, bechol yom, shalosh pamim. Whoever says tehillah leDavid 3 times a day, and we say it 3 times a day. You say it twice in the morning in Shacharit, once in the regular Sukkot Zimra, and once after Shmona Esrei, and then you say it again at Mincha. Muftach lo shu ben olam haba. You are assured that you're going to be a person who will have a place in the world to come. So let's just stop there for a second. This sounds like a great gig. I'll wake up in the morning. I'll say Ashrei twice. In the afternoon, maybe I'll say it once. Then I'll do whatever heck I want. Just said, if I said 3 times a day, Tilala David, meaning Ashrei, I guess a slam dunk. I get Olam Haba. Obviously can't mean that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the question is why? What's so important about Ashrei that he gets the Olam Haba? My Ta'ama, the Gemara asks, what's the reason? If you say that the reason is because it's an alphabetical order, what's so special being in alphabetical order? Now we know that how did Hashem create the world? 10 utterances. But it says that he used the letters, again, whatever that means in a metaphysical sense, that Hashem used the letters of the Aleph Bet to create the world. So the letters themselves have Kedusha. We know that a Sefer Torah that's written one letter that's wrong or has a problem with it, the whole Sefer Torah is pasul for be used. So that the letters in the alphabetical order of something, and there's a number of things that go in the order of the Aleph Bet in davening, but the fact that it has the Aleph Bet, if that's the reason that's so special, so the Gemara says, wait a minute, Name Ashrei to be made darech. Why not say Tilim Per Kuf Yud Tet every day? Good luck. It's 176 psukim. But because there you say 8 times. There's 8 times that you say the Aleph Bet, because 8 psukim Aleph, 8 psukim Bet, and etc. Ella. So what's the other possible reason that Ashrei, as we call it, is so important? And therefore he would get Olam Haba by saying it 3 times a day. Yishum de'it be potech et yadecha. Because it says in there, potech et yadecha must be alechochai ratzon, which we're going to talk in depth about another time. But it means that we turn to God and we acknowledge Hashem as the source of all of our needs, of our food, of our sustenance, and not just humans, and not just religious Jews, not just Jews who daven, not just Jews who keep Shabbat, everybody and everything. Must be the needs of everyone are taken care of by Hashem. So if that's the case, if that's so important, so why don't we say Hallel? That's what we should say, because that's even more inclusive, because it says he gives bread to all flesh. Ella, says the Gemara, what's the reason it's so important? Mishum di'it beitarte. It has 2 aspects. On the one hand, it has the fact that it's in the order of the Aleph Bet, and the Aleph Bet is so critical. And number 2, it also has the statement of Potech et Yadecha must be alecho chai ratzon. Before we continue on this point of the order and what's important about it, I want to show you something. This is from a Sidur I use. I saw the other day, I happened to notice it in my Sidur. I took a picture of it. I'm going to read this to you. This is from the Shar HaKavanot. This is the sefer that explains what you're supposed to think about when you daven. And in many cases, word by word, and sometimes syllable by syllable. Now, I said to you before that it's called Tehillah LeDavid because that's really the paragraph if you look up in Tanakh, in Nach. But they added the psukim, the 2 psukim of Ashrei Yoshevetecha and Ashrei Am Shekacha Lo at the beginning. Why? Even though they're not really part of the Tehillah LeDavid section, which we know we just saw the Mara. So why do we add those 2 psukim? Lirmoz Gimel Ashrei, to give us a hint about the fact that Ashrei is said 3 times. Why? She'ashrei hu otiot sha'ar milashon she'er milashon mazon, because the word Ashrei, the shoresh is aleph shin resh for osher, is also the same letters as shin aleph resh, which refers to mazon, which refers to sustenance. Keneged hamizonot shel shalosh olamot. that relates to the mizonot, to the sustenance of the three worlds, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, Anishpaim Ata. That we, by saying Ashrei Yoshei Veitecha, we have some spiritual effect on our mazon. No, it's in the Ashrei we talk about, or Tefilla David, we say Potechet Yadecha, and we talk about the idea of getting the sustenance. But in addition to that, we also have, there's the spiritual sustenance, and that is affected by the three olamot. Again, I'm not going to get to details of Bria, Yitzia, and Asiya. And by our saying those two psukim that said the word Ashrei 3 times, we have an effect on our spiritual sustenance as well. Okay, I'm going to skip this page for a moment about this sheet I'm talking about. We'll see in a minute. And I want to talk about this. Again, this is all by way of introduction now to Ashrei. If you ask somebody tell me something you know about Ashrei, somebody will tell you, well, I know it has this special pasuk, Potechet Yadecha Maspia Lecho Chai Ratzon. Others will tell you it's in alphabetical order, and the others still will say, there's a nun missing. What does that mean? If you take a look at Ashrei, starting with here, you have Bet B'chol Yom Avarcheka, Gimel Gadol Hashem Umula Meod, Dalet Dor Ledo Yishabach Ma'asecha, Adar Kvod Adecha, etc. It's in alphabetical order. Now you come down here, you come to Mem Malchutcha Malchut Kol Olamim Memshalcha B'chol Dor V'Dor. And then there's no nun pasuk, and it goes to Somech Hashem l'chol hanoflim okay l'chol hakefufim. So the people tell you there's a nun missing, right? There's a nun missing. If you put it out, you just laid it out straight in order, which I didn't do, you'll see Aleph Bet Gimel Dal Hey Vazal Chotet. Then you have Mem Samach. There's no nun between the Mem and the Samach. So one thought has been, one you'll see floated in a number of places, that when they're putting it, he was building this mizmor, that there was no pasuk that he could come up with a nun that was a praise of Hashem. Okay, fine. That never sat well with me. But I did hear something amazing a number of years ago, and I have not found the source. I heard it at least 2 or 3 times. I just never saw where it's from. If someone here knows, please you'll let me know. Look at this pasuk. You make this bold, make it highlighted, and make it big. Okay. Let's look at this pasuk. This is the one right after where the nun should come. Hashem is the one who supports all that fall, and he straightens out those who are bent over. Somech Hashem l'chol hanoflim. The nun does show up, but the nun is hidden for a reason. What does this mean? Hashem supports those who have fallen. The samach is there because it's part of the alphabet order. The nun is there. It doesn't come at the beginning because very often we don't even realize we have fallen, and Hashem has supported us and gotten us back to where we need to be. It's done very often benistar, in a hidden way, that we're not even aware of it. It is possible that we don't feel we've gone through a nefila, a falling of some sort. It is possible that we have spiritually fallen. It's possible that we have maybe physically fallen sometime, and Hashem is there to support us. And very often that happens without our even realizing it and knowing it or being aware of it. Somech Hashem l'chol hanoflim. Hashem supports all those that have fallen, and therefore the nun is in fact there. It's there hidden, and it's there hidden because it's also telling us a message that some things that we have that Hashem does for us many times, especially when it comes to our nefilot, our falling, Hashem is going to be there to support us, even if we don't even realize it. Okay, I'm going to stop share for a minute and go back to a different document. I'm going to read something to you. Okay, this is a combination of few things that I found about Ashrei. And remember, we talked about the Gemara. The Gemara told us that there's 2 possible reasons that Ashrei is so important. One was that it has the alphabetic acrostic, the Aleph Bet, and the other is that it also contains within it, you see here, source item number 2, that Hashem sustains all creatures. So that alone is one reason, or 2 reasons why it has the critical statement of that it's so important. Before we look at this page, one more comment. I said in a sarcastic way, maybe, if I wanted, based on that Gemara, I could just say Ashrei 3 times a day, then do whatever heck I wanted. Because it says, if I do say Ashrei 3 times a day, then I'm a Ben Olam Haba. I get it. Answer, it never would mean something so plain and simple. Not a chance. It means you live your life based on Ashrei Oshrei Beitecha. What does that mean? When we get into the meat of this Mizmor, and we'll see all the things that are in here, and we act on them, and we believe them, and we live by the credo of what it says in Tefilla David, and we've done that 3 times a day, meaning, actually, I'll come back to the meaning in a second, then we're entitled to Olam Haba. We're not entitled to anything, that we are B'nai Olam Haba. But what does it mean? Why 3 times? Why not 7 times? Why not 1 time? Is that important? Just saying it once should be enough. Why 3? So I'm sure many of you know that the concept in halacha of what's called a chazaka or chazaka. What is a chazaka? When a person, for example, has a piece of land and he lives on that piece of land for 3 years, and there's no one who comes to complain that land, oh, what do you do on my land? Then he has a chazaka that legally belongs to him, generally speaking. If I have I have this glass and I have it for 3 years and no one says anything to me, hey, that's my glass, it's mine. Even if maybe it wasn't mine to begin with. By the fact that I have it, there's not been any contention about the fact that it's not mine, then it's mine. So when a person does, for example, a minhag or custom, we know that once you've done the custom 3 times, unless you've done it and said the li neder, then technically you have to continue to do it until you do some form of hatarat nedarim. Again, it's established a pattern, a chazakah. The opposite is also true. What is the opposite? Gemara tells us in a couple places that when a person does an aveira once, twice, and 3 times, then it says hutar lo. It becomes permissible to him. Gemara says, hutar lo. What do you mean it's permissible to him? Chas v'sholom. Says, but it means naset lo keheter. Once he's done it 3 times, then in his eyes it appears it's okay to do it. What does that mean? That we also get entrenched in doing wrong things pretty quickly. You do it once, twice. The 3rd time you do it, it becomes much easier. I have, over the years, dealt with people who have gone through a process of addiction. And with most addictions, there are various levels. A person, let's say, who may be involved with drugs, may find himself or herself addicted to marijuana or some other drug, and then after a while may get peak and will not want that, and it doesn't suffice for them. They'll try and think about doing something a little bit stronger, and they may try the first time. It's very difficult for them. The second time, I'm not choosing cocaine specifically because that one time enough can get someone hooked, but some other drug. And by the 3rd time, it becomes much easier for them because, again, it becomes part of them, what they're doing. So lahavdil, when a person has the chazakah of something, of doing it, let's say the positive now, a minhag, or the chazakah of land, or the chazakah of property, or in this case, the chazakah of living like it says in Ashrei, then that already changes a person's life. In Pirkei Avot, you'll find many, many times the expression al shloshat devarim or shloshat devarim. Hey mamru shloshat devarim. Why? Again, when we talk in terms of 3s, becomes a very critical piece of information and something that has yitzivut or stability for future. So therefore, saying Ashrei 3 times a day is not sufficient. It's not what it means. It means living by the words of Ashrei and then having it become a part of your life. So now what I want to do is just take a look at this sheet. I put together an amalgam of ideas based on this Gemara. I'm just going to read it. One might understand that these reflect these 2 points here, that Ashrei contains the alphabetic acrostic, and it talks about potechet yadecha, that God sustains all creatures. One might understand that these reflect 2 separate points in its favor. According to such an approach, the cumulative force of the 2 totally disparate qualities make Ashrei unique. Meaning, according to one approach, is that it's this by itself and this by itself is not so important to make Ashrei that important. but together it makes it stellar. Others see the two themes as complementary, but not truly interconnected. The Maharsha and Rav Kook, in their commentaries on Brachot, understand the Aleph Bet as a symbol for the Torah written with those 22 letters. According to the Maharsha, this psalm highlights Hashem's dual role in sustaining us both physically and spiritually. He provides us with physical food as well as with spiritual nourishment. For the Maharsha, these two themes teach related messages, but do not unite in the formation of a particular idea. On the other hand, two significant 20th century rabbinic voices insisted on seeing a deeper link between the two themes. In their view, the combination of these two factors to emphasize a single idea make Ashrei unique. Meir Simcha Coin from Dvinsk, that's the Meshech Chochmah, he tells us, in contrast, Hallel, Psuket Zimra. The first, meaning Hallel, is recited only on holidays. Thanks Hashem for his infrequent but momentous suspensions of the law of nature on behalf of the Jewish people. For example, he split the sea, he took us out of Egypt, and he appeared on a mountaintop to give us the Torah. The latter is said daily, and thanks Hashem for the natural order that sustains humanity. One Gemara sharply criticizes those who recite Hallel daily because such an approach reveals a rejection of the natural order. The desire to always focus on the miraculous communicates that one is ungrateful for the regular functioning of the world that God created. Shuket Zimra, on the other hand, clearly should be said every day, as it expresses thanks for the regular and the normal. Ashrei stands as the centerpiece of Psuke de Zimra, and therefore must refer to the regular rhythms of nature. Meir Simcha argues that the careful pattern of beginning each verse, each pasuk, with the subsequent letter of the alphabet conveys the theme of nature's regularity. Miracles, by way of contrast, do not occur in a slowly and deliberately worked out plan. Gemara also mentions the pasuk or verse in Ashrei that highlights the natural orders containing the resource to sustain all creatures, as this reflects a prominent aspect in our appreciation for the natural order. If so, the form and content of 145, which is Tefilla LeDavid, unite to convey our praise for the wonders of the natural order. The Pachad Yitzchak Kutner, on the other hand, he finds a different theme in the combination of these two factors. Remember, one of the things the Gemara said, well, Potech Yadecha is so important. Why don't we say Hallel HaGadol? Why don't we say Hallel every day, right? Remember that Gemara said that. So he says he finds a different theme in the combination of the two factors, meaning Potech Yadecha and the Aleph Bet. He cites a midrash that sees Hallel HaGadol as reflective of the 26 generations for the giving of the Torah, when the world was sustained by compassion alone. Rav Hutner contends that after the giving of the Torah, God did not stop running the world with compassion, but rather the nature of that compassion changed. The earlier form of the compassion was chesed vitur, a compassion that sustains the recipient without making any demands on him. When there was no Torah, this was how God ran the world. After Matan Torah, there was a shift to chesed mishpat. In this model, Hashem continues to show compassion, but his giving includes the demands made of the recipients, meaning we have mitzvot, we have things we're supposed to do, and a just proportional relationship between the actions of the receiver and the largesse of the giver. By analogy, rather than just giving us a handout, Hashem finds us a paying job. And according to Rav Hutner, Ashrei reflects this second and higher form of function. Remember that the Meir Simcha, the Meshech Chochmah, looked at Ashrei as being something that just is our recognition of Hashem working through what we call teva, or nature, the natural order of things, not the miraculous. But according to Rav Hutner, the Ashrei is there as a different meaning. It's the second and higher form of functioning. The carefully structured pattern symbolizes the workings of justice that are steadier than the workings of compassion, totally divorced from justice. The two factors combine to utter praise for Hashem, who runs the world through compassion merged with justice. We said before that we see that within Ashrei we have a dual relationship with Hashem of Ahava and Yirah. Now we talk about, I'm using the words not that they're using here, Teva and Mei al HaTeva, natural order and things that are supernatural, such as Nisim, miracles. And he's talking about the fact here about having two levels of justice. One is compassion merged with justice, and the other is the praise is the compassion and justice. and then how they're merged together within Ashrei. It says, let us recall the Gemara question why Ashrei is superior to Halal HaGadol, which also includes a verse about God providing for all. Rav Hutner, that pasuk talks of God in his pre-Matan Torah mode of compassion, unmediated by justice. The alphabetic acrostic of Ashrei reveals that its verse about divine caregiving refers to the higher level of Chesed Mishpat that began with the giving of the Torah. Now, if you did not follow, if it was like, well, you're scratching your head, let's just kind of summarize here what was said. We get the feeling from the Gemara, from Rav Hutner, from the Maharal, from Meshech Chachma, and others, that there's something critically important to Ashrei. No one of them is right and no one of them is wrong, meaning that we're going to be able to find these themes that they're talking about, whichever way you look at Ashrei. It's the fact that Hashem works through nature and beyond nature. It's the fact that Hashem works with justice and he works with mercy. It's the fact that Hashem's relationship with us is ahava and yira, all of that. So it gives us a special quality and importance to the tefillah, or to the section known as Ashrei. And now we can go back and say, we can understand more of why did the pasuk Hurachum come according to Bisrat. Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal said that it's more of a patiach, that it's an introduction, just like we had by Mar, which we'll say soon. We're going to say Hurachum Yechaper Avon, and you're going to go into Baruch Hu and the brachot before Shema. So too, this patiach Hurachum that came at the end of Yehi Kh'vod acts as the entryway to Ashrei for all these different themes, and then of course follow with the halukas that come afterwards. Next week, Bezrat Hashem, we'll start taking a look at some of the psukim, some of the deeper meanings. The one pasuk we'll probably focus on the most, if it's not yet pretty obvious, is the Potechet Yadecho Masbiya Lechol Chai Ratzon. We'll spend quite a bit of time on that. And we'll look at some other psukim as well. In the meantime, have a Shavua Tov and try to stay cool if you can.